This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another episode of Diagnosing the Aftermarket A to Z. I'm Matt Fanslow, and fitting for this episode, I think, is a quote. We can't retract the decisions we've made. We can only affect the decisions we're going to make from here. I'll elaborate more after we get a word from our sponsor, NAPA Autotech Training. So, are you looking for the right training provider that offers cutting-edge courses to hone your automotive skills? Well, let NAPA Autotech take you to the next level. Go to napaautotech.com for more details about classes near you. One of my mentors, I consider him a friend, but also a mentor, called me up to just shoot the breeze, honestly. And when we do, we're usually on the phone for hours, and I savor every second. I've mentioned him before. I'll keep mentioning him because I don't know that he's known as well or as much as I think he should. And maybe I'm ultra biased, but he had a tremendous effect on me when I first, I guess, was really starting to get going. So we're talking maybe late 90s. I found him on IATN. And I guess I'm not trying to delay who this is. His name's Jim Wilson. And he's a former General Motors dealership technician, and he specialized in diagnostics and emissions, I think almost specifically drivability and emissions, as he is in California. So he is very, very active on IATN. And then he had his own website called flatrater.com. And right now, I mean, it's not really there, if you will. He has another new website. It's not so new. It's been around a while, but it's a terrific, terrific resource. It's called scanshare.io. And I think many of his case studies from Flatrater are on there. I don't think I can say enough about the guy, and I probably have tried. Coming out of school, specifically my third year, the third year was very, very focused on diagnostics. That's about the time I found IATN. And that's kind of when I got to start reading his posts and specifically his responses. And some people will say he was short or used very coarse language. I beg to differ, but I also had the benefit of meeting the guy and getting to know him. But extremely, extremely smart. Not only seeing the conversations on IATN, but learning about flatrater.com and then subscribing to it. And that's some of the posts on IATN did this, but really what he did on Flatrater and now ScanShare was he would have a vehicle and you would, describe it, the complaints, put up, code list if there was one, screenshots of the Tech 2, data recordings when needed or appropriate. And he had written applets, I believe they were called, to also be able to manipulate the data. So he was taking Tech 2, which was the factory scan tool, handheld scan tool for GDS and GDS2, that you could manipulate the data, go through it, and he would kind of give you a part one and then a follow-up part two. And part one, usually, and by usually I'm thinking all the time, gave you all the information you needed to diagnose the vehicle or make a very accurate assessment. And he talked about using inference, which I think a lot of us would think of deductive reasoning, right? We reduce, we remove things as possibilities. I think that falls kind of under inference. Inference is a bigger umbrella term, but it's coming to a decision or a realization based on the data, the evidence, if you will, and then your understanding of the systems and I suppose just reasoning. So in some cases, it almost felt like the opposite of deductive reasoning. That had a profound effect on me. And also, he did not use lab scopes that much. And part of it, the GM dealership culture, if you will. And part of it is he could get there without using it. And when he needed it, he used it. But he could get to a lot of places strictly on scan data, understanding the system, and then probabilities. What are the probabilities that this could be an issue or that could be the issue? Just a profound effect. And it didn't help just on General Motors. I found I was using it on everything. So back to the phone call, we're just kind of talking, and he starts talking about using DTCs to diagnose. And I don't mean like pull the code, go over to your service information system, or trust the scan tool decodes it properly or defines it properly, looking it up, paging through bulletins and, whatever, trouble trees, if you will. No, he's talking, and it's very fascinating to me. What codes can set? Does this vehicle even have the ability to set certain codes? So maybe one easy one I'll pick on as an example was that I had a vehicle in rather recently that had been to a couple other shops, and it ran very roughly. And if I remember right, it was an inline 4-cylinder. It doesn't matter about the make or model. I don't feel like that's important. Dual overhead cam, 4-cylinder. Idles very rough. Misfires accumulate on all cylinders. So previous shops had already did the spark plugs and the coils and first fuel injection cleanings and intake port, or running cleaner through the throttle body, if you will, or the intake manifold, bunch of cleaner through it, ended up replacing the injectors. It just still idles very rough. One of the interesting comments the customer had made when they dropped the vehicle off and having the stack of invoices from the other shops, and the stack, I'm not trying to exaggerate. It's not like this big stack. It was like 2 or 3 invoices. So they had made this comment that nobody thought it could be a timing chain or timing belt. In this case, I'm almost positive it was a chain. It couldn't be the timing chain because it didn't set any codes. There's no DTCs in it. There's just P0300 would come back. I think you can already see where I'm going with this, or should. This vehicle did track the intake cam, but for whatever reason, they did not have a sensor on the exhaust cam, and they didn't phase the exhaust cam. This thing had an EGR. It was watching the intake cam. It did not have the ability to set an exhaust cam fault or timing fault, cam crank correlation specifically to the exhaust cam. So I'm hoping you've already kind of starting to figure out where I'm going with this. The exhaust cam was retarded. It was basically getting EGR all the time. It's specifically too much at idle. The fact that cam timing was ignored because it did not set a DTC for it, and so then it's just ignored, not even considered. That's kind of interesting. And we could beg on them all you want, but we get spoiled, right? Car after car after car, we start getting spoiled. This car is running rough. There's no check engine light. Check engine light's not flashing. There's no P0300 type codes. So it must not be misfiring. It's so easy to fall into that trap. It doesn't set a DTC, so that's probably not what's wrong. In a lot of cars, that is 100% viable. But it's interesting to find yourself looking through code lists to find out what kind of DTCs is this system capable of setting. That's how he thinks. And when he said it, it makes perfect sense. And then what do you catch yourself doing? On harder problems, more difficult problems, you start paging through what kind of DTCs can this vehicle, this system really, not the vehicle, what DTCs can this system set? And sure, my example, we could have looked at a wiring schematic or honestly a good visual inspection and seen that there was no cam sensor on the exhaust. But sometimes it's just not that easy, right? Sometimes they do have the sensors, but they don't have the algorithms for whatever reason. Or they don't work the way we think they work. NAPA Autotech training sessions are being conducted day and night in a town near you. This training caters to every level within your organization, be it a mechanical assistant, a mechanical specialist, a technology specialist, or a driver safety calibration specialist. Imagine a one-stop shop training partner in NAPA Autotech that will lead your team to a path to greatness. Autotech's entry-level Build-A-Tech classes convert the untapped potential of your new hires into money-making mechanical specialists. Autotech's higher-level tech update classes introduce specialists to the world of ever-changing technologies, which prevents your shop from getting technologically stagnant. Remember, if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. And turning to the front of the store, the Autotech Service Advisor class is an awesome way to hone your client advocate skill set, ultimately benefiting the customer through an improved vehicle repair experience. But it doesn't stop there. Imagine an electric vehicle class that takes your specialist well past the mundane, yet necessary safety topics. Well, it's here. Autotech's EV Ready training is a week-long curriculum that takes participants through a hands-on experience involving hybrids and electric vehicles. The session kicks off with the use of PPE and proper tooling while touching on required OSHA regulations. Then, the students dive into the lab vehicles to gain knowledge of the common high-voltage components on EV and hybrid vehicles and their function. Attendees will be taken on a path exposing them to different electric vehicle manufacturers to compare component form and location. Additionally, information about Level 1 and Level 2 charging systems will be included, along with a quick look at DC to DC charging. The operation and maintenance of subsystems are explored, including the different modes of Tesla operations, and so much more. So what are you waiting for? Commit to taking your business to the next level with NAPA Autotech training. We get caught with stuff that was taught years ago. And one of them would be like circuit codes versus performance codes. That if you have a circuit code, and we'll pick on cam crank correlation again. So now we have a DTC set for, we'll just say an exhaust cam sensor. That's a circuit code. That's how it gets defined. A lot of times we're ruling out cam crank correlation. It can't be out of time. It couldn't have jumped a tooth. It couldn't be the chain is stretched, because otherwise, if that was the case, it would have set a performance code. This is a circuit code. I have to test wiring, and you start focusing. In certain cars, certain systems, that was the case. You could do that. But if you look at the code set criteria, if you can dig around and find it, you may find out this circuit code sets when it's expecting a certain voltage change at a certain time. So if it counts, we'll just BS numbers, hypothetical. If it sees 6 pulses from the crankshaft sensor, it expects to see a change from low to high on a cam sensor. And in this case, the exhaust cam sensor. And this is just a hypothetical. So if cam timing's off a tooth, which could be 11 degrees, 14 degrees, depending on teeth, that switch doesn't occur when it's expected, or it occurs long before or after. It's not when it wants. It's not within that window that it's looking for the voltage switch. So it sets a circuit code. How many people, how many techs have been down the rabbit hole, and maybe not super deep, but they've chucked a part at it or 2 or 3. How many hours have been spent perusing wiring, just trying to go through it with a fine-tooth comb? How many sensors have been chucked? How many PCMs or ECMs have been slammed? This thing sets a circuit code. This is a pretty powerful diagnostic technique. And granted, managers and bosses sometimes don't really see the value of you sitting at your computer, paging through a code list. But I think if you give some of these examples, they should see the value in that this is time well spent. And maybe you don't have to look every single DTC you can set, but the ones pertaining to the system or circuit, if you will, of what you're looking at, this can save you a ton of time. You can also use it to try to prove certain logic. Is this capable of setting a circuit code? And on a modern vehicle, it's pretty rare we run into a system that won't set some sort of DTC if you unplug it. But still, maybe it can't. We can't assume anything anymore. But it's worth looking, or taking and pulsing something low through maybe a test light, proving the module's ability to monitor the circuit. It's a really, really interesting way of looking at things, and adding that to your process and adding that to your strategy, right? Strategy-based diagnostics. I know that's a term coined by GM, but that's really what we're doing. We're coming up with our own strategies. What's possible? And this will lead hopefully into an episode I'll get to record with Rich Falco that I've been looking forward to. I got to get time. Hopefully our schedules align. That I think we can take this idea and go in a little bit different direction, but I think it holds water. Another example is communication codes. And It's somewhat rare, but you can get burned by this. There are certain modules. The example I have was a radio. It's on a network, and a full-blown network, like a CAN network. And not like, it was body CAN. But the radio in this case really didn't send information anywhere. It was just monitoring. And really, I suspect the only thing it was monitoring was maybe a wake-up signal, but honestly, I think it was just vehicle speed for the adaptive volume or speed adjusting volume. So when the radio is not working and I can't talk to the radio, there should have been a red flag that, one, this can't even set a U code for the radio. That was a clue. And I mean, luckily I didn't throw parts at it. Luckily I didn't go too far down a rabbit hole, but I could have. It would have been so easy. Radio's not working. Can't talk to it. I could have easily slammed a radio in this thing and not fixed it. Just looking at a wiring diagram, there wasn't enough information just on the wiring schematic to make the call. All the radio was doing was watching for vehicle speed. It served no other purpose. I mean, the radio itself did for audio, but on the network, it wasn't really part of anything. And so, luckily, this is after I'm talked to Jim, that it just kind of occurred to me, before I go ripping this radio out and get numbers off of it. I ended up ripping the radio out for testing, but ripping the radio out to get numbers off to order one. I'm thinking, I wonder if this thing can set communication codes, because I didn't have one. I didn't have any. And maybe this is a weak example, but I think it is. I think it definitely pertains. It's that type of philosophy. And using this information that we wouldn't normally, I don't think this was ever taught anywhere, to kind of page through and see if a system itself is capable of setting, or what kind of DTCs it's capable of setting. How about this sensor or circuit? How many DTCs are there for the engine coolant temp? Just the one? Or could it send 10 different ones? It's interesting. And so, the only reason I got to learn this specific with the DTC list is networking. Going to training conferences and meeting your heroes. I know they tell you not to, but I've met many of mine, at least in this profession. I've only been let down like 12 or 13 times. So that's pretty good. No, just kidding. I've never been let down. They are always so much better than you would ever expect as people. And then you just find out you thought they were pretty smart. And then, yeah, they're way smarter than you thought they were, which means they're way smarter than you. At least me. That's how I got to find out about this, that meeting him and befriending him, and then having the pleasure of having him call from time to time. And just, I don't think he was out to teach me a freaking thing. I think he was just thinking about it, just kind of off the cuff, like, hey, you ever catch yourself doing this? No, but now I'm going to start. Oh, man. Not only networking in person, but networking online. This is going to be a recurring theme. You've heard it before. You should keep hearing it until you start doing it. Get out, hit some training conferences, meet people, shake hands, rub elbows, get to know people. And then online, there's Facebook groups, of course, but get involved. IATN still has archives. Don't get me wrong. I don't think IATN or anybody involved with IATN listens to this, but whoever's idea it was to scrub names from people that have made posts because they're no longer members. I don't know how to mince the words. What a douche move. What a douche move. They posted it on there. I'm sure it's not legally theirs, but that's their intellectual property. They deserve that credit. So if they're not members anymore, they don't get to have their name in italics or a special color. But they still made that contribution, and they deserve that recognition. They deserve their name associated with that information. So that being said, I still think ITN, all those archive posts and conversations with some extremely smart people is well worth the money and time to check out and read through. And Diagnostic Network is another resource that's extremely valuable. Even just part of your day to log on quick, see what's going on, and you're going to find certain names that you will be able to hang your hat on what they say. That database, that resource is just continuing to grow. And then there's multiple Facebook groups. It seems to be new ones all the time, and that part's almost getting nauseating. But there's other ones that are just absolutely borderline required membership or joining. Membership implies you've paid to be in there, but you really are doing yourself a disservice by not joining those groups. So I can make a very strong argument that social media is evil, maybe not by itself, but there's some very, very nefarious things with social media, and they're horrible. Horrible. On the flip side, there are some terrific resources. So I think if you can keep your wits about you, joining them is, like I said, it's just almost borderline required. One of them is the automotive HVAC technicians. I have learned so very much from that. An episode or two ago, I think I talked about the UV beast. That's where I learned about it. And there's so much more, and stuff that you thought you knew, thought you had a pretty good grasp on. Yeah, you didn't. Chad Austin and I spoke about that in our episode. So, that's just such a good one. I think there's another one like the Automotive Insight Network. That's an extremely good one. I guess I could go on and on and on, to be honest. There's quite a few. AutoMD is another one that comes to mind. I could keep going on. And then there's kind of like the HVAC one. There's ones that are specialized. So European cars, specific car lines. I think there's more broad ones like automotive technicians. Sometimes there's some really, really good content. Sometimes they kind of go sideways. But these are very valuable resources. And if you can pick a few that are up your alley, hopefully you can contribute a little bit, and then also learn their search functions. Just a terrific resources. So yeah, I hope you kind of see where I'm going with that. I hope you check out ScanShare. Try to go find some of those archives. And yeah, I get it. The vehicles are going to be older, but you know what? The strategy, the philosophy, and the using of inference applies. It will always apply. Even probabilities, like learning to factor in probabilities, start to help you from going down rabbit hole. I don't know that many of us hold ourselves too terribly accountable for getting our butts kicked on absolutely jacked up problems. But ones that we turn into big deals that weren't jacked up problems, I think we're a lot harder on ourselves. And I think using probabilities helps avoid that. Reading that stuff from Jim from flatrater.com and finding a lot of the content he has shared and commented on and posted about on IATN and I believe Diagnostic Network is so very well worth your time and money. See if you can get your shop's owners or managers to help with the membership fees. It should be really no different than service information or training. So if they're going to be paying for your online NAPA Autotech training, they should also consider helping with your memberships to IATN, Diagnostic Network, etc., ScanShare.io. It's well worth the money if you put forth a little bit of the time and effort to make use of it. So that is how I will leave you. Thank you very much for listening. Like usual, if you got ideas for subject matter in the future for upcoming episodes, or you would like to be on the podcast, please don't hesitate to send me an email or give me a message. My email is mattfanslowpodcast@gmail.com. I would also like to thank our sponsor, NAPA Autotech Training, and the Aftermarket Radio Network. So until next time, take care.
You've been listening to Matt Fanslow, diagnosing the aftermarket A to Z on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Matt on your favorite listening app. He's very interested in what you have to say. Let him know what you'd like him to cover and come on the show. Matt is all for advancing the aftermarket. Find Matt Fanslow on social media and connect or on aftermarketradionetwork.com.